My name is TJ Kelly. I'll be your host and moderator for today's discussion. Today's topic, as you heard from Dan at the top of the presentation, is hidden in plain sight. We'll talk about detecting drugs and contraband inside of inmate mail without opening it. And joining us to discuss this topic here is our panel of experts. First, Mr. Dan Pacholke. Dan actually could not join us today. He's stuck in some travel. We all know how crazy travel is at the moment, but Dan did contribute to some of the statistics and analysis that you're going to see on today's presentation. So we are grateful to Dan for that contribution. Dan is a retired secretary of the Washington State Department of Corrections, currently working as a private consultant in the corrections field. Second, we have Mr. Will Plummer. Will is the Chief Security Officer for RaySecur. He's a 25-year veteran of the U.S. Army, where he served as explosives ordnance disposal expert. Will, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And lastly, Mr. Rich Roy. Rich is a retired Deputy Commissioner, Inspector General, and Chief of Investigations for the New York Department of Corrections, and also currently working as a private consultant in the corrections field. Rich, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, DJ.
Our agenda for today, we will talk about the current state of corrections. We're calling that a crisis situation, and we'll talk all about why we're calling it that. We'll discuss the causes, the elusive and evolving substances, ineffective screening, all the things you saw in that poll earlier just a few minutes ago. And we'll talk about a new approach, what organizations can be doing to detect some of these elusive threats and how this new technology works and how it might help. We'll also have a demonstration of that technology a bit later in the hour. Lastly, a reminder, as you heard Dan say, we will have time for Q&A at the end of today's presentation. So if you have those questions, please throw them into the Q&A box. I will read those aloud, and we'll let the panel discuss those and talk through all those ins and outs. So before we dive in, a quick introduction to who we are as RaySecur. We are the world leaders in mail security. We are headquartered outside of Boston, Massachusetts, with offices in Quebec and Canada. We do have a global footprint with deployments all around the world. You can see some stats on the screen here. We're engaged with more than a dozen correctional facilities at both the state and local level. We're deployed in multiple federal and state government facilities, including protecting G8 world leaders, the U.S. Department of Defense, and several state departments of corrections. And we have a large list of high-profile corporate clients as well that you can see down the bottom there. So that's who we are. That's why we're at the table today. But without further ado, what I'd like to do is bring in Rich Roy. Rich, we're calling this section the correction facilities are in crisis. So can you take us through some statistics and some facts to talk about why we're calling it that and what we're seeing out there?
Sure, and with the audience that we have, I'm sure everybody knows these things anecdotally and or statistically, but we're just kind of setting up the problem that you all are dealing with, and it is. I have a favorite saying that in corrections we all do the same thing, we just do it a little bit differently. So that I think we'll find that the majority, whether you're in a county jail or whether you're in a correction system, these are going to be similar problems that we all face at this point in time. What we're seeing is dramatic increases across the board nationwide. Drug usage, contraband interdiction, costs, staff risk, which is extremely important, as well as death rates. Now, as you see on the slide, it's really quite simple. Addicts go to prison and they still have a need for the drugs, and therefore when you look at these numbers, and I know some areas might even argue that it's much higher than 58% state prisoners and 63% jail inmates, I believe that's covering Bureau of Justice Statistics information. Death rates on the rise. There's a lot of contributing factors on that, as you all know, with COVID, in state prisons, old inmates getting older, staying alive longer, dying in prison, and such. And then we're seeing it 200. We don't have specific information on nationwide yet on drug overdose deaths, but I think anecdotally, as we'll go to a slide after this, we'll see that there is in fact, at least apparently, on the rise. So what does this all do to us? There's an administrative concern. So we look at costs that are straining the system. On the right, you see a $750,000 settlement for South Dakota due to a pretrial overdose. The other problem that we have in corrections, like everybody else in the world, is instantaneous media. So these things that didn't necessarily hit the street, so to speak, are hit it immediately. So we have more lawsuits, family concerns, and malpractice lawsuits on our medical staff. You see increases in hospital stays, again, not necessarily attributed to drug use, but we certainly see overdose and intervention on the rise. And then, of course, we have staff issues and concerns. There's a cost involved in people developing Narcan programs, and there's the purchase of the equipment, sometimes with grants, sometimes not, and then the training of the employees and having it handy so that if either employees or inmates are exposed, we're able to respond. And then, of course, most importantly, staff exposures, people in the mailroom, officers, etc. There's the cost involved with that. Number one, beyond the cost, is the health concerns of the individuals. So the individuals have to be medically treated, and on top of that, therefore, they have to be replaced if they are sick and are out for any period of time, so that you have replacement costs and you have workman's compensation issues. So this is a discussion here of a microcosm of Colorado. Now that we're singling out Colorado, there's an excellent article whereby Colorado DOC Inspector General Sherry Daigle shares the concerns, and it's a great summary in the Colorado newspaper of the state of, I think, all of us in corrections and what we're dealing with as far as narcotics interdiction is concerned. You see kind of compelling in the article, the Colorado DOC indicates that in 2018 there was 48.4 grams found, and then you just move forward three years later and you're at 400. And I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but because again, you all know this. The commerce of drug smuggling, the amount of money, there's an example, 3.8K for one piece of drug laced paper, which you can get 96 doses in some places, and depending on the commerce, it could be $40 each, it could be more, it could be less. And then kudos to Latimer County, the drug trafficking ring dismantled. They arrested 12 people, 9 in jail, and it was kind of based on the a mail introduction of contraband drugs into their facility. So one of the things that somebody that's been in the business for quite a while, it impresses me, and I'm sure it impresses all of you that have been doing this for a while, is the changes in the methods of bringing in contraband. You know, historically, the sources were pretty much the same. We have visitors bringing in contraband. If those of you allow packages, you have smuggling through packages, sometimes in an elaborate fashion where they're able to solder cans and put them back, put the drugs or the contraband in there. People dropping off narcotics for outside crew inmates, and of course, compromised staff, and always mail and legal mail was always a source of it. But as a result of changing times, we have inmates that are more sophisticated, more technical acumen, and we see different types of methods of introducing contraband into correctional facilities. Illegal cell phones has exploded in the last few years. And as a result, our corrections and our partners develop ways in which to interdict these problems. So we see wireless containment systems, cell phone detection, and those types of things being developed. Drone drops, we didn't have those 20 years ago. At least we didn't know we did, and I'm sure we didn't. So as a result of that, you have technology and companies developing drone defense techniques in order to interdict drones. People are changing their package methodology, either eliminating packages or ordering through secure and approved vendors. You see a proliferation as a result of both visitors, staff, and inmates moving contraband. So we're seeing a great expansion of body scanners, most other than above and beyond the usual metal detectors that we've used historically. So they've got X-ray body scanners, much more facilities. And then, of course, we have what we're talking about today. The synthetic drugs, the ability to send in, liquid laced, whether it's K2 or you call it spice or methamphetamine through paper, and something we didn't have as much as years ago at all. Suboxone, relatively new drug, and obviously easy to smuggle. So as a result, we're developing technology in the private sector to help corrections solve problems as in the mail and the legal mail field. And we all know legal mail, even if those of you that are in a digital mail environment or looking at it, many of you have restrictions on legal mail. So there's in this case, you're going to see some solutions even with legal mail, whereby we can maintain the individual's rights and still maintain the safety and security of the facility.
Excellent. Yeah, Rich, thank you very much. Obviously, like you say, a lot of the audience members here today will be familiar with many of these anecdotally, if not statistically. Clearly, the problem is out there. So where we want to focus today is on mail, right? RaySecur is in mail security. Rich, you hinted at a little bit the legal mail question versus digitization. So, we'll focus on that a little bit and talk about how mail is the easy entry point, can be causing a problem, and what can be done about it.
Okay, so basically what this is 120 days of open source reporting that has happened across the country. What we really do here is we pay attention to what happens and the after effects of those events. The big kind of culminating meaning behind it is, with today's environment where we all living in, the second something happens to your facility, you're in the news. It didn't used to be like that, but now it's the 24-hour news cycle. We're all kind of stuck and drug into this thing. The part that gets me on it is if you look at the amount of injured officers, the amount of injured staff, because A, they're exposed to harmful, toxic, and noxious chemicals. Generally, they're protected, wearing gloves and you're wearing whatever PPE you have, but the overwhelming amount of mail that they're having to deal with at some of these facilities. I spent a lot of time in prisons, and one of the things that I've heard throughout all of my visits has been, we stopped visits during COVID. We increased the amount of mail that started coming through the mailroom, and people are overwhelmed. We'll talk about that a little bit when it comes to how to recover from some of the challenges. But generally speaking, these officers, when they get injured, they're buried in mail, and with that, they've got a huge amount of drugs coming through there, so they end up being like surrounded by it. The other thing to think about with this, and we'll talk about this a little bit, is the amount of external influences that prisons and correctional facilities have to deal with things like the cartel, where they are actively trying to force drugs into the facility because they make money doing it. It's pervasive, and unfortunately, with the mail problem, it's just going to continue to rise.
So, Rich, would you talk us through? Again, we're kind of hinting at it a bit here, but this cat and mouse game of the small quantities, and why mail is, again, such a factor here.
Well, as everybody knows, drugs are commerce, and when you are able to move things for money, when you're able to do things with apps now to move money on the street from one family to the other, and there's so many different avenues that make it easier for these people to do these bad things, and which leads to, as Will brought out, whether it's the cartel, your STGs, gangs, somebody wants to control that flow, because controlling the flow controls the money, and we all know in prison that's what the bad guys try to do. So there it's easily hidden. Mail, when you can soak a full page or two or three if you in an 80-page legal mail packet, that's a whole lot of drugs, that's a whole lot of money. And we go back to the statistics to show you, and how many addicted people there are. And then you have the control of the people that are controlling the money and the commerce. So they keep changing. We have to change our responses as a result. So the infused, like I said, K2, whether they call it K2 spice, whatever they call it in your area, suboxone powders, baths. I guess in some places they're even moving in bath salts with called Flakka. I defer to the audience. I don't know that much about that one, but it is a cat and mouse game. So we keep trying to catch them, and they keep trying to beat us. So that's kind of corrections security in a nutshell, and it doesn't change with smuggling drugs through the mail.
So the other problem with this, if you're looking at sensing technologies, is, to Rich's point, is they change the chemical compound that they are actually sending in through the mail. You end up with maybe a very expensive piece of equipment that you're using to detect what's in there, and it sees something, but it can't tell you what it is because the library doesn't align with whatever chemical compounds they put together. So truly being a cat and mouse, if they're tracking and they know exactly what you have for screening technology, if they know exactly what you're using, it just takes a little bit of internet searching, and you know exactly how to get around it. That's a good point.
No, not at all. That's actually a perfect segue into our next one, where I want to bring you back in, Will, to talk about the ineffectiveness of current solutions and building up to what we can be doing about that.
So it's interesting. What we have on the left is just the techniques that most of the facilities that we've been working in and around is doing. I mean, you look at everything from light tables to black lights. That's somebody trying to scan 400 pieces of mail with a flashlight in their hand, and that's just not effective. A good chunk of what they're stuck doing is unfortunately trying to push a snowball uphill, because it's just going to keep coming. And if all you've got is, you know, what's in your mailroom and your tactile inspection, as the poll question we started with kind of led to, the tactile inspections are not the best way to A, keep your staff safe, and B, keep drugs out of the facility. So a couple things that we talk about that are difficulties for folks and why these screening effects or these screening events are ineffective. Staff investigator shortages. We've talked to facilities that they'll only get an investigator every week, maybe every 2 weeks. So you're stuck trying to hold legal mail, for example, that you question, and then you're getting pressure from the facility to try to deliver it. Overwhelmed screeners. I've seen that quite a bit recently, where it's 1 or 2 people inside of a facility trying to handle 1,800 beds and get all their mail through in a day. And unfortunately, that's a big task. That's something that's really hard for people to do. There's other tasks you put on folks, like reading for content. If you actually do have a facility that allows hard mail to come through for personal mail for folks, that slows everything down, but also increases exposure. One of the things that we found is a lot of what we see is inconsistent, even from inside of a state. You have very different functions that folks have put after this problem to try to fix it. And the biggest problem that comes up with is twofold. One is a technology that allows people to focus in on the problem that's at hand. We're trying to find drugs in the first place, not necessarily test, just absolutely find them to begin with. And the second one is testing difficulties. So if you're doing something that's disposable, like you've got I'm not going to name companies on here, but you've got something that's doing chemical detection with a throwaway kit, you're going to go through a lot of money, because spending all the time that you're going to have to use to do this and all the expendables that you're going to use to try to test what you think has probably got drugs on it, it's just going to go through budget. And that's going to be problematic in the long run. So that's one. And two, I mentioned on the last slide, if you're using something that is that's going to give you a chemical breakdown, it's going to look at exactly what you have. A, it takes time, but B, it doesn't necessarily always find what you're looking for. Chemical components change; they make adjustments to the mixtures of whatever they're putting in. And if the library that you're using in that equipment doesn't change quickly and doesn't stay up to date with what's going on in your area, you're going to end up having problems with it just telling you nothing found, even though you might be holding a very dangerous chemical.
So what we'd like to do from this point, Will, is talk about, you know, some of the solutions, you know, the one that RaySecur recommends, and what else you've seen out there that you could help our audience work through. And we'll go into a demonstration in a moment here. But before I do that, Rich, I want to throw it back to you real fast to see basically if there's anything to add on top of what Will had said. You know, what you used to see in New York, what you're seeing now in your private work, you know, of the cat and mouse game here. What are the, you know, the problems that we're seeing as we kind of tee up some of this demonstration for Will to go into?
Well, there's a whole lot of contributing factors that make it easier for the bad guys as well. You know, we're seeing nationwide staff shortages. Just like in private industry, states are having a hard time hiring people. So therefore, you don't have necessarily all the things in place all the time that you would like to have. And sometimes it's budgetary, that there is technology out there, but people can't afford the technology. So affordable technology in these areas is important. And it's knowing what's out there. I think the key for correctional agencies when it comes to technology and possible solutions is you don't know what you don't know. So things like webinars that we're having today help people understand that there are possible solutions out there. Not every one of them is going to be perfect, but especially in contraband interdiction, it's a conglomeration of efforts that you try and stem the flow, whether it be canines, whether it be, again, x-ray scanners, whether it be what we're going to be talking about today in the mailroom. You do your best to cut it off and stop it, and then wait for them to see if they come up with something else and move forward. So I think consistently across the line, there are a great deal of issues that contribute to making the proliferation, as well as the chemicals available, et cetera, increasing from years past.
Well said. So, Will, on that note, let's talk about the effectiveness of mail screening with new technologies for T-Ray. Can you take us through some, you know, what that looks like?
Yeah, of course. So what you're seeing on the screen is powder. That's 100 or 50 milligrams of powder moving inside of a package on the top, and then the bottom one is liquid. If you look at this technology and what we're doing with it, look at it like a new version of a sonogram or a new version of some sort of imaging that you would see at a hospital, for example. If you look at an X-ray, it's meant to look at hard items. It's meant to look for things, weapons that have physical density to them, where the X-ray can pick up what it is. When you put most of the threats that we're looking at nowadays through an X-ray, it's just going to go straight through it. There's not enough mass there to actually give you an image of what you're looking at, especially if you're talking about things like paper or suboxone strips or small amounts of powder. So you've got to realign and readjust what you do with it, what you do with your screening techniques. So T-ray or millimeter wave, which is the system that we'll show you in a second, what this thing does is it looks at those soft items and it gives you the ability to see them moving around so you can interact with them and you can see exactly what you're holding in your hands before you open up the package. And it'll also allow you to focus on where the threats are and where they're most likely coming from without having to open anything. One of the first things that we talk about whenever we do training is staff safety, minimizing exposure, and then focusing the investigators and whoever has been assigned to interrogate the item that you're looking at on where they need to be looking. So instead of trying to see the entire haystack looking for the needle, we're just grabbing a handful of it and pulling the needle out of the handful of it. The goal is to maintain privacy and confidentiality as well. So when you're using systems like this, you don't have any personal information that gets pulled up. So oftentimes we talk to DOCs and facilities, and there's this real fast hesitance to taking imagery because that's inmate or staff's private information. It doesn't come up with this because you can't pull that out of the video. You maintain anonymity. Protecting the mail screeners and handlers, that's obviously #1 priority. Reduce the mail screening time and how much we put on resources and how much we draw off of the finite amount of time and money that's only available. And then detect contraband and drugs. That's the goal. So when we started doing this, we had a lot of questions that got asked and we didn't have many of the answers, but we've gone around and figured out the answers as they come up, and we continue to do so.
Yeah, so Will, as we move on here, the things that we'll see in this demonstration, right? We have a list here, and we can talk through, capabilities as you're hinting at there, and then we'll give a bit of an introduction to what that technology looks like on the next one. But what kinds of things are we finding and specializing in detection here with this new technology?
Big thing, and as the poll question began with, what are you finding? What's the biggest threat? We're focusing heavily on lace paper and suboxone strips. Those are the holy grail of what gets in because it's so hard to detect. That's why everybody's got this problem. I've been all across the United States in prisons, and everybody will tell you it's the same answer. That's what we're looking for. Mm-hmm. So we're focused heavily on that because those are items that just are extremely difficult to find. Powders and liquids, those are fairly easy for us to identify. There's not a lot of prisons running around with little baggies of cocaine. Not that I've heard or seen. But they're fairly easy to detect. Weapons and contraband, site security. If you're looking to screen through clothing, if you think something's been hidden away, if you look at soft items and see inside of it, and then obviously the electronics problem that came up on the poll question as well. It's not necessarily always the cell phone getting in. Cell phone's probably in there already, and we'll show you a couple examples of things that we were pulled out of legal mail that were supporting cell phones. USB-Cs where they've obviously been broken in the facility, and some family members broke down parts and pieces to send it in, and Miles will show you that in a second. But communications as well, SIM cards. We all know that money's being moved around electronically, and with that you need phone numbers, you need to know bank addresses, and written down on a piece of paper is one thing if you're doing a cell search, but keeping electronically is probably a little bit better, especially if you're trying to use a large amount of money going back and forth. The one thing,
Will, if I may,
yeah, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to make the comment when you're talking about cell phones and SIM cards and such. Back to the comment that I made about it all tying together, and there's so many issues. So the proliferation of illegal cell phones allow inmates to direct people on the street on how to do these things. where historically we would be able to listen to calls and hopefully pick some of this stuff up, especially with the new technology that allows us to do a better job of monitoring phone calls. When they're using illegal cell phones, we're finding that the intel on that is oftentimes organizing how to get things in and getting their mules and their people on the street, whether sending it by mail or any of the other ways in which we talked about. Thank you.
I've seen a few very interesting sets of directions on how to lace papers. Like, that's a big one. Exactly what to do, exactly what to find, because they, on the inside, they know what's getting in, they know how it's getting in, so they just repeat that, send the instructions out, and move on to the next package.
So yeah, as we move on to the next slide here, this is going to tee up this demonstration, and we'll bring in another gentleman to help us with that demo in a minute. But Will, can you kind of introduce what it is we're going to be seeing on this demo, so we have have an idea of that?
Yeah, just for reference, because like I said in the beginning, this is sort of a new way of looking at imagery. Don't expect to see something that looks like an X-ray, right? What you're seeing here is a few examples that we pulled. One is testing simulated suboxone strips, because we don't have suboxone strips here. But you'll see a picture on the bottom, that's actual suboxone strips hidden inside of legal mail that we pulled out of a facility. If you, in your mind's eye, look at this and imagine what the inside of the envelope, the inside of the package looks like when you're seeing the imagery, it'll help you out a little bit. I'll tell you that once people get it, they get it. And then you start looking at what the drugs look like in the facility, they stand out. And it's fairly apparent fairly quickly. So Miles, ready to kick off the demo?
Yeah, we'll throw this over to Miles Cathers is the EOD technician and specialist for RaySecur. He's going to take us through a live demonstration of this technology and show off what the system is capable of. So Miles, take it away when you're ready.
Thank you, TJ. So administratively, the unit weighs 70 pounds. It's 3 feet by 3 feet by 2 feet. Comes in a blue shipping container. The shipping container doubles as a work platform. Allows the unit to be mobile. The casters on the shipping container are good for concrete, asphalt, light gravel. Power requirements for the unit are standard 110. So you can run it off a backup battery supply if you wanted to have this in a mobile configuration. The unit is touchscreen user interface. Everything that the screener needs to do is located here, with the exception of the dial. The dial is the only moving component on the MailSecur. It's been robustly engineered, so it can withstand a lot of abuse. As Will has talked about, with the technology is millimeter waves. So we're using radio waves to look through packages. Unlike X-ray, it means you can have your hand in the screening area. It's perfectly safe to use, but that it's not X-ray, the limitation is we cannot see through metal. Anytime that you have something dense, like you can see this firearm here, move it over to the zoom. And what I can tell you about this firearm, you see the trigger and trigger well, but I can tell you that this is either a replica or prop or toy firearm, because I can see through the frame, I can see through the slide, and as I move it around, I can see through the barrel. So that's telling me this firearm is made out of something other than metal. When we're looking for metal items, things like contraband in books, we can see through approximately 150 sheets of paper. Here I have a composition notebook, 100 sheets of paper. As you can see, when you're looking at it on the screen, there's some dark spots here, but it's a little hard to see because we're getting up to the limit of what we can see through. With books, one of the things that you can do is fold the book open to start looking. And here you can see adjacent to the spine, we have an item. And then up here, adjacent to the spine, we have another item. Anytime you want a better look, move it over to the zoom. And as you scan through, here you can see the outline of a utility razor blade and the outline of another razor blade. What you're looking at here is a razor blade taped to the page, and then another razor blade taped to the page. As you flip through a book, you may not see something like that. So this is adding a little bit more security that you're going to find something to give you a further investigation. So we're teaching the screeners to really look for normal versus abnormal. What we have here is a USPS envelope with 5 sheets of paper folded over. You're looking through the envelope and the equivalent of 10 sheets of paper. You have your adhesive strip on the back, 5 sheets of paper in the envelope. This is a good representation of what normal mail looks like. So when abnormal shows up, it's going to look something like this. This here is 2,500 milligrams of powder. Again, because this is a live image, it allows this screener to get a better idea of what's in there without having to open it up. If this was an X-ray image, you might have to open it up to see what this dark mass is. Here with the MailSecur, because it's live, the screener can give it a shake. You see it moves around, and then when you tilt it, you can see it all falls back to the bottom. That's giving you a good indication you have some type of powder or loose item in there. People aren't sending in 2,500 milligrams of powder. We've seen baggies of like 40 milligrams of heroin or cocaine. But what we're seeing are things, smaller quantities. Again, you have your adhesive strip on the back, 5 sheets of paper, the edge of the envelope. You can see this corner here is clear. As I move it over, the lines here are a little distorted and it's a little darker. Anytime that a screener has something that's dark or they want to get a better look at what it is, move it over to the zoom, which you can see here, you have the edge of the paper and the edge of the envelope going into the corner, and then it goes dark. Give you an idea, this is what a normal corner looks like. Again, this corner. Give it a little shake, you can see it clears out, and when you tip it back, you can see those individual grains of powder falling back into place. To give you a reference of what you're looking at, this is a 500 milligram Tylenol. This is 1/4 of that Tylenol crushed up. That's what's inside that envelope, is 125 milligrams of powder. Our ability to detect powder is down in the 25 to 50 milligram range, depending on the consistency of the powder. This is 1/8 of that Tylenol crushed up, so you're looking at 62 milligrams. You can see that powder, 62 milligrams loose powder moving around inside the package. Other items that we're seeing, liquids coming in, liquid methamphetamine, other items like that. Liquids, as you saw in the slide, liquids show up very easily. One thing we're seeing with liquids, these packages tend to get popped in transit, so screeners are seeing things that look like somebody spilled coffee on it. You know, screeners should be aware, hey, follow extra precautions, PPE. Anytime it looks like it's unusually wet, it could be some type of liquid that had ruptured and contaminated the envelope. So addressing the concerns of suboxone, what we're seeing is suboxone hidden under stamps, under return labels, address labels, under the adhesive of envelopes. They're steaming open the seams and hiding it under there. So what we have here are 5 suboxone simulants underneath the stamp on the right. On the left is just a normal stamp. When you place that on here, you can see the outline there of the suboxone simulant. Here I am running my finger over the normal stamp. You can see it's pretty much translucent, and here's the suboxone simulant. When I bring that over to the zoom, again, nice hard edge. This is my finger on the normal stamp, seeing right through it. Suboxone simulant gives you, it stands out. Another example of suboxone on letters, we have 5 suboxone simulants folded and right on the adhesive of the envelope. When the screener's looking at this, again, this line here is a little distorted and blown out. When they move it over to the zoom, what you see is the edge of the envelope and then the edge of the paper. So as they screen across, that stands out, something that shouldn't be there. Gives you probable cause to do an inspection of the mail. When it comes to treated paper, here I have 5 sheets of normal paper pulled right off the ream, and then 5 sheets of paper that I sprayed with Raid approximately 4 months ago. So when you look at these, the treated paper has more of a camouflage or oil sheen to it. The normal paper is pretty much translucent. Screeners aren't often getting a known good and a known bad, so we're teaching screeners how to screen the mail for treated paper. You already have to do your tactile and visual inspection. If we move that to the deck, you're doing your MailSecur screen as well as those tactile and visual inspections all at the same time. we tell screeners press down, slide out. As you see, when I do that, the paper, the image goes pretty much translucent. Now, when I move my finger, you'll notice there's a little bit of movement around my finger. That's the radio waves bouncing off of my finger. Now, the treated paper, when I put it down, I'm going to raise my hands to show you that I'm not touching it, but it has the appearance that it's moving even when the envelope's not being moved. When you press down and slide out, you'll get that ripple on a pond effect. And then when I move my finger, you see all this movement around the screen not correlated to my finger. That's the radio waves interacting with the material that's been deposited on the paper. When it comes to legal mail, this is a mock-up of what was found in one of the facilities. We were with the screener for 4 hours doing the initial training. The next day, I observed while she was running through the mail, this is what she had found. So this was addressed as legal mail. When she received it, it was already dark, and according to the training, she was already going to move it over to the Zoom to take a good look, but she noticed the edge here had a bump out that didn't correlate to anything. So she moved it over and started screening, and when she got to that corner, what she saw was this dark item right there. That was probable cause to open it up. This is this mock-up of the same thing, and what they found was a USB-C that was cut into 22 of the 26 pages. So they were able to screen through, because it was folded over, effectively 52 pages of paper to find a USB-C underneath the staple. You can't really feel that when you're checking, and having watched how they're screening, they're removing the staples and then inspecting the legal mail. To do that, they're holding it here because they can't let the pages flip over. So inmates are watching how they screen and adapting their techniques to try and get past how they screen, because they would screen like this, and what you find when you're holding it, because you don't have a staple to hold the pages, it's hidden right there. So an item that may have been let through because of the way that inmates are adapting to screening practices was caught using the MailSecur. We have the ability, and I'll use this one to show how if a screener finds something suspicious, you can collect that data. So place it on the main deck. When you have something suspicious, hit the record button. You can bring it over and get a video of it. When you're done, hit stop. The screener can then access that locally to bring in an investigator and show them what it was that they found. You can view that video locally. If an investigator wants that information, they can plug in a thumb drive right here on the front of the USB port, hit select, and copy to drive. It's got a standard date time format. It goes from the hard drive to the investigator's thumb drive for a chain of custody. We also have our EOD Secure program. So if a screener ever has any questions about what it is that they're seeing, they can call us. There's a direct number for us or an 800 number. And we have military trained bomb technicians on staff that will remote into the unit when given permission, and we'll assist the screener with what they're looking at. So the screeners don't have to be experts at image analysis. We can provide that expert ability.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Miles. We do have a few questions that had come in during the demonstration. Reminder to folks that we would love to hear more of those questions if you've got them. So, please feel free to add those into the questions box. Will, I'd like to bring it back to you to, kind of take us through what we saw from Miles, go over that a bit before we dive into the Q&A here.
Yeah, so basically what you saw was a system that's non-ionizing. There's no radiation, there's no safety concerns, there's no certification or training requirements, and allows you to see inside of mail. And the intent is to be able to, like I said before, maintain privacy, protect your individuals that work for you, all the things sitting on this slide. The one thing that it does do that I think is most important is it also gives a feeling of safety and a feeling of actually finding things. And your security staff, if you've been, if your security staff is the one that's managed or is trying to deal with the security aspect of it, but the people doing screening your mail are administrative in nature, it really puts more trust, faith, and confidence in the administrative staff that's trying to get that job done. And unfortunately, it's an overwhelming and taunting job sometimes, but it does relieve some of the stress and some of the pain of it.
Excellent. All right. Well, at 12:01, I think we can call it there. Thank you all for your attention today. I hope it's been helpful. Will, thank you for spending your time with us today.
Thank you.
And Rich, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your contributions. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you.